everyone. I'm Ellie from Nourishment Redacted, and welcome to Lioness Lifestyle Live.
Hi, everybody, and I'm Cristie from Meeting Wellness. I'm so excited to meet with you this evening, so thanks so much for joining us.
And I'm Hayley with Meatiswhereitsat. I'd love it if you got your questions ready. And if you're going to ask a question, please put 3 question marks or QQQ in front of it so that we can get those questions for our guest.
So I guess that means now it's time for the Roar of the Week. So every week we hunt through all the awesome comments that we get. So if you like tonight's show, then when it's over, go comment on any one of our 3 channels and you just might get shouted out as next week's Roar of the Week. But from our special bonus episode that we had, the Roar of the Week this time goes to Squeaky Toys 5911. Short and sweet, and I love the hearts there. My favorite show with all my favorite ladies. So thank you so much, Squeaky
Thank you.
That was awesome.
Also, you guys, I have an exclusive interview with Cristie at Meeting Wellness on December 30th at noon Pacific, 1 Mountain Time, 2 Central, and 3 Eastern. And then Ellie's going to hang out with us at the end, and you can get to know all of us Lionesses together, and it's going to be awesome.
I look forward to it. It's going to be a lot of fun. All right. So there's a reason why we're all here. And it's to talk with our wonderful guest today. I'm so happy to bring on Erin from Brewing Better Living.
Hi. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So we would love to know about your health journey so far and how you found the low-carb lifestyle. Please tell us all the juicy details.
Okay, so it's a long story, but I'm going to try to keep my long story as brief as possible. And then if you want to ask any more questions, that's cool. But basically, my weight loss and my health journey goes all the way back to when I was a kid. And when I was a kid, I can remember I was sick a lot. I had asthma. I had a lot of allergies. I remember staying home a lot, sick from school, had bronchitis a lot. And then like when I was around 11 or so, like in my tween years, I can remember having, I guess you could call it like IBS type issues. I would eat, and then a little while later, I'd have really bad stomach cramps and I'd end up in the bathroom. And one thing that kind of sticks out about that is I remember like eating like cereal and milk, like that would do it to me. And that all makes sense now. But back then, you know, I was just miserable. So that went on for a long time, but we're talking back in the 80s and 90s when your parents didn't like drag you to the doctor for like every little thing. So there were no tests or anything going on, you know, other than the asthma. If I was turning blue, I was going to the hospital, but your stomach hurt, you know, that was it. Maybe you stayed home from school, you know, but that stuff would continue on like into my teen years. And then even as an adult, and I'd end up with some other stuff going on. Like, I'd get chronic hives. I had really bad eczema over my eyes and behind my ears, bad headaches, things like chronic urinary tract infections, heartburn, constipation, probably other things that I don't even remember, but there was just like a lot going on like throughout my younger years. And I was also a little overweight. And kids would make fun of me sometimes. Now, I always say that if you were to pluck me out of school in the 80s and 90s and put me in school right now, and I'm sure Cristie can vouch for this, I would probably be like more along like normal sized or maybe even smaller than a lot of the kids. But back then, you know, I had a little bit of weight on me and I was considered heavy. So time would go on, and then probably like as I became a teenager and moved, got a little older, I would start to slim out just a little bit. And I don't even really remember why. I just remember that happening. And then probably when I was about 19 or 20, I made a decision that I wanted to go into law enforcement. And I knew that with that, if I were to get hired, that I would have to go through a police academy. I would have to do physical training or PT. And of course, that would be challenging under the best of circumstances, right? So I made it a point to start working out like crazy. I made it my job to work out. I, worked out basically with dudes. So I was doing a lot of guy stuff, like, you know, push-ups, bench pressing, pull-ups, dips, all of that stuff. And I actually got pretty strong and ended up getting hired and going through the academy. And I was able to do all of that successfully. So that was a good thing, right? So fast forward, finished that up, first couple of years on the job, and like what happens with a lot of people in that career, I was just doing shift work. I was sitting on my butt a lot, driving around. Then later I was in an office. So I started to really like pack on the pounds, right? And probably I would get up to around 160 or so. And now I'm only in my early to like mid 20s at this point, and I'm like 5'2", weighing like around 160 pounds. So I was pretty miserable. I wasn't really strong anymore. I wasn't really working out. I was just heavy and just like not in a good spot. So I can remember talking to my mom and being like, I'm really not healthy. I remember throwing around like the word diabetes and saying like, what if I'm headed towards that? And she said, well, why don't we like lose weight together? So her and I together, we joined one of these major international like weight loss plans. And we both lost quite a bit of weight. And I kept that off for a while. But then about a year or so later, I would meet my husband and we would start dating and, you know, going out to eat and going on vacation and doing all of that stuff. So of course, then, you know, the weight would creep back up. So when I got married, I'd say I was about 140-ish pounds, somewhere around there. So nowhere near what my top weight would be, but I was still heavier than I had been when we met. And then 3 years later, I would get pregnant with my daughter. And that's when I really, you know, other than the baby weight, I really packed on the pounds then, because I like to say that I was on the Snickers diet. Like I can
I've been
remember,
on that diet, Erin. I hear you.
remember every day. What?
I said I've been on that diet, I think. I get it.
I remember every day at work, like in the afternoon, going to the vending machine and getting like not one, but 2 candy bars, because, you know, I one for me, one for her, right? So anyway, when I went to my final doctor's visit before I gave birth to her, I stepped on that scale and I was about 200 pounds. And that was the most that I had ever weighed. But, you know, it was a baby. So I gave birth to her and lost the weight. Didn't lose all the weight, but lost a good amount by having her, and then by breastfeeding. That helped a lot for sure. So a couple years would go by. I never really lost all of that baby weight, and I would just kind of like keep putting it on. With the job, still working, trying to raise the kid at home and everything. You know, it was stressful. And then probably around the time she was like 5, like kindergarten age, my job got really crazy. I was in a new assignment. It was very stressful. I was having to go into work a lot when I wasn't scheduled, called in the middle of the night, holidays, weekends, all of that sort of thing. And it just got to be too much between having a little kid at home and doing this job and the stress of that. So after going back and forth with my husband for quite some time, we decided that I was going to take an early exit. And that's exactly what I did. And I essentially became a stay-at-home mom of a school-age child. I guess that's what you'd call it. And, you know, I did like a part-time job. I did like a work study program in New York City with like photography, because that was my passion. And I was trying to pursue that and, you know, do those creative things that I had always wanted to do. So as this was going on and I'm getting up to like my highest weight, I just decided at one point that I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. I didn't even know how much I weighed at that point. I'm going to say that it was probably upwards of 200 pounds, and that's without the baby this time. Because the first weight that I have on record when I actually started keeping track of that was 175. And I know I had already lost weight at that point. So basically, when I decided to make a change, I just started doing like the things that like I guess a lot of people start to do. I started to walk, and then walking turned into one of those couch to 5K programs, and I started to run. And then I got that running bug, so I wanted to do races. So I was doing the 5Ks, and then I was training for a half marathon and all of that. So this was around 2015, and at a point when I was supposedly in really good shape, I was the leanest I had ever been. That was when my health just started to like completely fall apart. It started with like the weirdest things. Like I would get these strange nodules in my feet. They couldn't figure out what they were. I was getting really bad heart palpitations. And then I started to get like, I don't know if you would call it dizziness, more of like lightheadedness. I would stand up and like it would kind of start to go dark and I'd feel like I would pass out. Never did actually pass out, but I would get those spells all the time, to the point where like sometimes I didn't want to drive my daughter around because I was afraid to drive the car. I didn't know what would happen. So that would begin the time of me bouncing from doctor to doctor, specialist to specialist, cardiologists, neurologists, and of course, as you can expect, every test that they would do would be negative, or everything would be, normal, so to speak.
Can I ask you what you were eating at that time? What was your diet?
I think I've talked about this before. In my quest to get healthy, I thought I was doing all of the right things. So I was eating a lot of whole foods. I was eating a lot of green smoothies, a lot of vegetables. I had cut out red meat. I did not use a lot of salt because salt is bad.
Yep.
So, in retrospect, knowing what I know now, I probably could have handled a lot of this stuff a lot differently and successfully, but I knew none of this back then. I was just going on the conventional wisdom and what you're supposed to do to lose weight and become healthy. So, so in bouncing around from all the doctors, I was, I was told things like, you're around 40 years old, this is what's going to happen with all these things that were going on. They were trying to give me anti-anxiety medications, basically making me feel like I was crazy. And, sometimes I think that I actually thought that I was for a while, because it was like, what is going on? This doesn't make any sense. But this would keep going on. The different symptoms would keep popping up. And then some things would get really strange. Like I would get these almost like I could only describe them as like internal tremors. Like it would feel like I was having like these buzzing sensations inside me, but you couldn't see them. And I've since talked to other people that have had the same type of thing with autoimmune conditions and whatnot, but my doctors were like, they had no idea what was going on. I would, not only that, but I would have muscle spasms that you could see. I would get sensations that I found out were neuropathy. Like I would wake up, my feet, my hands would be burning. Sometimes my mouth would feel that way. And in addition, I was getting like hot flashes, cold flashes. So then I'm thinking, okay, maybe this is normal. Maybe it is because, I'm a woman and I'm going through this stuff. But in the meantime, something just didn't seem right. So I kept pushing ahead. All the tests, again, were coming back normal. They were running autoimmune panels on me, Lyme's disease screenings, basic blood work. What else? Did I say thyroid, all of these things, and they were all coming back normal. So at one point I finally decided, well, I'm going to do things on my own. And I ended up getting my own micronutrient testing done that I paid a lot for out of pocket, but I had to know what was going on and how to fix it. And that was the first time things turned up weird. Like it turned out that I did have quite a few deficiencies at that point. B12 was one of them, a couple of other B vitamins and some other things. I don't remember exactly what they were, but now it was kind of making sense to me that maybe there was more going on. And that's why I was having all of this happen. So
I'm sorry. I just wanted to ask you. So when you went to many doctors and had many tests done by doctors who are supposed to, and so you probably had insurance covering that stuff, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then you pay for your own panel out of pocket and it shows up with stuff?
Well, you know what it was?
That?
So the neurologist was one of the doctors that actually ran a couple things on me, ran heavy metal testing, ran B12 and stuff. And the one thing that he did say to me that I always remember, he said, okay, your B12 is in range, but it's still low. You need more of a cushion. So even he knew that something wasn't quite right. And he told me to supplement with B12 and stuff, I think at that point. But to make matters worse, when all of this was going on, was that I had already had a history of anxiety. So as all of these symptoms are coming on, my anxiety is getting worse and it's becoming like this vicious cycle. And mind you, I looked completely normal, so to speak, on the outside. You know, so all of this stuff is like an invisible thing. Like I felt like crap, but everyone else thought I was fine because I was going about my daily life, attending the school events, you know, doing everything that I had to do because I had a little kid. So that I think just like made it worse. But what would eventually happen was stuff started to pop up on my skin even more. Like besides the chronic hives, I started to get like patchy rashes on my body that would come and go. And that led me to my dermatologist. And he was the first one that said, I think that you might have celiac disease. So he ran a test for that. He also, so he ran like the antibody test for celiac. He also ended up running like a genetic test to see what my celiac risk was. He ran some allergy tests and whatnot. And at that point, the antibody test for the celiac would turn up negative, but the genetic screening would show, and I think that the scale with the company that did the test was 0 to 8. And the higher you got, the more at risk you were. I was a 7. So I had a very high risk level for, you know, either having it or developing it eventually, basically. So yeah, so I credit this doctor basically like saved me because you could tell like he actually knew that something was going on. But either way, even though that test, the antibody test came back negative, he still wanted me to see a GI doc because he felt that there is a certain percentage of people that still test negative but still have the condition. So he said, go to the GI doc, get tested, see what happens. So I went to the doctor and he basically foo-fooed the idea of the celiac disease because my antibody test was negative. But when I was speaking with him about my symptoms, he started to ask me about bloating and whatnot. And I said, yeah, you know, like after I eat, sometimes I bloat. And quite frankly, I thought that was normal, right? You eat food, it takes up space in your stomach gets bigger. Now, mind you, it probably shouldn't have made me look like I was 6 months pregnant. I'm sure that wasn't normal, but I thought that this was like, this happened to everybody, right? So I think that was the day when I found out that that was not normal, that was not supposed to happen. And he said to me, I think you might have a condition called Sibo. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but that's small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So they sent me for testing for that. And sure enough, it came back positive. So now a lot of stuff was making sense. There actually was something wrong with me. So I worked with him. I also worked with a functional medical doctor, and I also started to see a nutritionist. And she was actually the first one that brought up the whole low carb thing. So now here's my introduction to low carb. Because she would tell me like basically what I could eat, what I couldn't eat. And she would say, keep it to under 100 carbs a day. So, okay. So I went along and I did this. And part of the thing was I had to do a low FODMAP diet, which did involve cutting out certain high FODMAP gluten containing grains. So I just went completely gluten free. Like even besides the high FODMAP ones, I just cut it out completely. So I did all of that. And over the course of time, even like within days, I remember it happening pretty quickly. I just started to improve. Like certain symptoms would go away. And then in a couple of weeks, I'd feel better. And then in months, I felt better. And then eventually I was, you know, almost completely back to normal. Like I had my life back again, thankfully. And after I had dealt with the Sibo, I decided I'm going to stay gluten-free, and my doctors agreed that was probably the best thing. So I did that for 4 years. And then the lockdown would hit, and like everybody, I was frustrated. I was sick and tired of being at home and everything that was going on. And in the summer of 2021, I think it was, I decided I was going to start eating the gluten again. I just wanted to do what I wanted to do. And I started eating it again, and I was so happy because I was making all of my homemade pizzas and my homemade breads and all of that stuff that I really love to do again. And it was fine at first. I felt okay. And then as time went on, I would start to feel little things start to happen again. And I kind of like wrote them off, and I was in denial because I was like, oh, I never tested positive for celiac. It's fine. It's nothing. It's something else causing it. But things would keep popping up. Eventually, I would start getting like the burning sensations in the heels of my feet and whatnot. And the neuropathies were coming back and some other things. So in 2022, that same dermatologist ran more tests on me. And that was the first time I had some autoimmune markers come back. Like I had an ANA run and it came back as mildly positive. So he wasn't too concerned. I was very concerned. I was like, here it is. This is it. This is like lupus, like all of my cousins have and everything. I was convinced I was done. But he ran it again in a few months and his suspicions were correct and it was normal at that point. So I continued on with the gluten and, you know, that poor choice of doing something that really wasn't great for me, but I wanted to live my life how I wanted to live it, right? So this brings us up to March of this year. Still having problems, went back to see him for like my annual skin check or whatever. And he again runs the celiac panel and the regular blood work and everything else. And lo and behold, for the first time in my life, those numbers turn up positive. So prior to that, I had started to look into like low carb, and that's when I started to hear about carnivore and this sort of thing. So I was toying around with the idea of giving that a try. I was very intrigued by it. I knew that I had to do some stuff to better my health. I knew I had to get back into a good place again. But then those test results would come back positive. And if you know anything about celiac disease, you know that in order to go through the whole testing procedure, you still have to be eating the gluten. So I had to continue eating the gluten and eating even more of it every single day leading up to my endoscopy and to finalize the tests and all that. So I kept eating it and I was pretty miserable, like eating so much of it, like during that period of time. But I did what I had to do. And after my procedure, the doctor came into the room. He said, okay, resume your gluten-free diet. And instead of just doing gluten-free, I jumped in with both feet. I did gluten-free. I ate all non-processed foods and I went like extremely low carb all in one day's time.
Whoa.
And, you know, like Cristie and I have talked about and things that we have done, like stuff started to get better so fast. Like, you know, I just felt so much better. I wasn't having the aches and pains, the joint pains and all of that in the morning. My anxiety was going away. I mean, look, I eventually started a YouTube channel. I could have never done this before.
Right.
You know?
We're so glad you did.
But also with that, a couple of weeks after, not weeks, I'm sorry, a couple of months after all of that success with just feeling better, I decided I'm going to start working out now. So that basically started with just, I was doing squat routines every day. And then from there, I moved up to doing these little like dumbbell exercises that I'd find on YouTube. And then I eventually found the Keto Bikini Pro, Natalie Grasso. That's Coach Bronson's girlfriend. I think you know who he is, right, Cristie? And I joined her program, and that's like what I'm doing now. I'm just like living my life, loving getting stronger, and can't believe that I have this health at this age and that I feel this way. And that is my very brief, very long story. I know it's a lot. So
You muted me, Cristie.
I know there's some feedback coming from somewhere. I'm not sure where it's coming from.
I hear that too. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know where that's coming from. So sorry, everybody. Yes, we do. Oh, there.
That's
I don't know
fine.
if I got this, but anyway.
Yeah.
I have a couple questions, but before we get into those, Miss Erin, we have a lot of awesome people here saying hello. So this is something we like to do each week. And so here we go. We've got Mike, who was first to point out that he was first.
Woo, go Mike.
He's always first.
So, hey, Mike, thank you for joining us. We've got Renee saying hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hi, Renee.
Cammie at Last Day of Normal. Hi, Cammie. Glad you're here. And of course, Mike is singing along the Lions night. Bruce says howdy, folks. Howdy, Bruce. And Gail also says howdy.
Hi, Gail.
I think people were surprised to know you were a cop, Erin. So Mike says, don't tase me, bro. And then he wants to know if you ever tased anyone. Did you ever tase anyone? We
didn't carry tasers at that point.
Okay, there you go.
That came after I left.
Just the big guns.
Hey, Greg. Yeah.
So Greg is here. Hi, Greg. Nice to see you. And Brenda's giving us a roar. I love that. And a little testimonial. Brad says carnivore for a year now. Yeah, that sound is back. I'm not sure. I'm so sorry. Decided to try it for 30 days because I was desperate, mental health reasons, and it worked. So I'm still living this way. Yes, Brad, I'm right there with you on the mental health. Simpson popped in. So hello, Simpson, and also Deb.
Hi.
And we got a meat for the win. Yes, meat for the win.
Thank you for explaining what that was, because I didn't know.
Oh, the FTW? You mean I didn't know? Woohoo!
Ellie's gone.
Yeah,
I think she's gonna fix the background.
I think she's trying to resolve whatever the issue is with the waterfall. Michael says, good evening, ladies, and everyone else. Hope you had a great Christmas. I did have a great Christmas. I hope everyone else did too.
Oh yeah, that was a blast. We had a good one.
Good. And then Gail says, I like hearing stories of people with whom I can totally relate. And it's funny to hear my story coming out of Erin's mouth. So Erin's mouth
I hear my story coming out of other people's mouths all the time. It's crazy. Everybody's is very similar.
Yeah. And it's crazy that a dermatologist ran that test. Maybe she needs a dermatologist. Yeah. Sometimes you just don't know which doctor
He thinks outside the box, and whenever there's an issue, he's always willing to test for it. So I definitely credit him with saving my life with this, because I don't know where I would be.
So at the beginning of your story, to bring up my first question, at the beginning of your story, you talked about a lot of ups and downs with your weight, but like trending up, right? Up to like the 200-pound mark. Yeah. But my question was, when you're like, screw it, I'm just going to eat all the gluten because we're in lockdown and I'm doing it. Like, did you put on weight doing all of that?
Excuse me. I did put on weight, but I never got back up to like that 175 and greater. I think that a lot of that really, when I was at my heaviest, I think a lot of that, the stress played into that too, of everything that was going on around me. So even though things were horrible with the illnesses and all of that, I never had that level of stress, if you will, where I just, I don't know. They say that it factors in somehow, so I'm sure that it does.
Yeah.
I'm sure that the stress does. The high rates of cortisol for long periods of time are not conducive to weight loss or anything of that nature. So let's talk a little bit about your program with Coach Nat, because I know it's like a 2 or 3 months or something, right?
This one was actually a 3-month program. So it's over. This is the last week of it. So it started in the beginning of October and it runs through till like the first week in January or January 1st, something like that. But yes, that was a long one.
Yeah, that is. And you had some specific like training that you needed to keep up with, days of the week, eating plans. It was pretty involved, right?
Yeah. So she wrote workout plans for everyone, depending on like your level, whether you were beginner, intermediate, advanced. And during the first part of the program, we basically like did body splits, where we were working out a couple of days of the week, just doing different body parts during each workout. And then once it came closer to the holidays, she did it a little differently, where we were doing 3 full body workouts each week, so that it was easier to fit in the primary workouts with like everything going crazy around us with the holidays. And then during that time, there's some supplemental workouts that you can throw in there. Like for instance, Monday, Wednesday, Friday were your 3 full bodies. And then Tuesday and Thursday, there were some like optional things that you could do, like just like targeted glute exercises or things like that. But all of that. And then she also would give us advice for what our macros should be. And so that was the first time I ever had to follow. I mean, I had done the whole like calorie thing. I had done the whole points thing with Weight Watchers and all that. But this is the first time that I actually had to figure out, okay, I need this much protein, this many carbs, this many grams of fat. And sometimes it was like hard to balance that at first. You know, because it's very easy to like, if you were eating like, for instance, like a really fatty steak, you could all of a sudden, you'd eat so much of that, you'd be over whatever fat level she wanted you at. So it's very tailored and very specific based on the bodybuilding goals, basically.
Okay, so she didn't just put out a blanket, like, here's your macro, like everybody got individualized
Nope.
macros?
It was based on like, because she works with everyone low carb to carnivore. So it was based on like what your preference was and what you did. So mine at that point was, I guess it was kind of keto low carb in the beginning. And then I had to adjust things a little bit as I went into low carb just to fit what I needed.
Okay, and then can you talk about that a little bit? Like adding back in some carbs and why you did that, the rationale behind that. I'm all with it. Proper human diet, low carb, awesome.
Yes.
Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
I'll go back to even before I started this 3-month program. I was very low carb and I was doing, I guess, what you would call more of like a ketovore type thing. Like I was doing like really heavy meat when I started, but I would do the cheeses and the dairy and stuff. And sometimes I would add in like the blueberries or maybe like a little bit of maple syrup on my yogurt or like little things. It was still very low carb. But like I've mentioned before, I started to, it wasn't that I felt bad. I actually felt great. But I was like downing so many electrolytes every day just to like stay normal. Like if I didn't have enough, I could start to feel like the headaches start to come on and just feel like a little off and wonky. So at one point I kind of got this feeling like, I don't know if it's normal for a person to have to be like taking like 4 or 5 elements a day, essentially. So I was like, why am I doing this? Like, wasn't really for health reasons at that point, as far as like metabolic syndrome or anything. So I decided that I was going to up the carbs a little bit. And I went to 50 total grams at first because I was keeping it total, but I knew the net would be below. And I was still basically doing keto. I was still in ketosis. And then she would suggest my macros for the plan once I was in that. And I noticed that I was actually still having some of these feelings. I was waking up with that fruity taste in my mouth. I was getting up to pee like all night long. Like something just wasn't right. And it wasn't my goal to be in ketosis. It was just my goal to get healthy and like do the program and whatnot. So I talked to her and it was suggested like, yeah, it's okay to play around. Like you can up them a little bit more. So I upped them then to 70. But on certain days, my net was still rather low. And I was still having these issues where I was seemingly in and out of ketosis. And I would test with the urine strips and they would be positive. And I'm like, what is going on? This doesn't make any sense. Like, I never realized that could happen. But she said if you're metabolically healthy, that it can be very easy to go in and out, apparently, like that. So now I'm up a little higher. And she said, just make sure you try to keep the net carbs over 50. And you should be fine. So those are basically the reasons why I went ahead and started adding back in that. And at this point, I'm at a weight where I actually have to add a couple pounds in the form of muscle. So I'm trying to add back in, and there's like only so much protein you can do. And, so I'm doing a balancing act between adding extra carbs and extra fat at this time and whatnot. So those are basically the reasons why. I hope that made sense.
No, that makes sense. And this is why I'm a total believer in it's personalized for everybody, right?
Absolutely.
So like my carbs are still pretty close to 0, but I'm not downing 4 or 5 element packets or whatever you said. Now, if I don't have any electrolytes for a few days, yes, I will get a headache. Yeah. So I do like 1 element pack a day, keeps that headache away, just to keep my electrolytes, in balance or whatever.
Yeah. Not sponsored, but that's a good tagline. I like that.
Like I know that you can make your own for so much cheaper.
Yeah.
I know you guys, and some things I do make, like my bone broth, but like I'm not going to. I'm just going to go to Element whatever and buy them.
Yeah. I can say, I'm sorry, Element, that I'm not using 5 packs a day. I've really cut my supply down. They're losing money for me.
I love it.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my god.
That's so funny because it really is individualized because I've, me being on carnivore, I think almost 8 months now, I've not used any electrolytes the entire time. I just salt my food to taste.
Yeah.
And I'm good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely salted the crap out of everything too, but something with me, and even back, I don't know if I mentioned this when I was going through my story, but at one point they thought that I had POTS, which is an autonomic condition. And when you have that, I see you guys nodding, so you know what it is.
Yeah.
But
My
your goal is,
my sister
Okay.
has POTS, and she also had Sibo, and she has
Okay.
EDS. So she has.
There you go.
I'm familiar
My
with it.
sister also had POTS. Yes.
Okay. So the goal is to keep your blood volume really high. So they tell you take in a lot of water, take in a lot of salt. So I don't know if that kind of plays into why me personally, I needed all of that because I was dumping fluids constantly with the ketosis. So it very well could have. I don't know. Like you said, it's individual completely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we had this pop up, 0 electrolytes here, kind of like you, Ellie, just salt to taste. That's how I started. And then I started getting this headache that was like different from any other headache. And probably if I salted more, I'm sure that would keep that away. But yeah, I'm salting to taste. But if I don't get a little extra in there, then I do notice that. So yeah, everybody's different. How about you, Hayley? Do you do any extra electrolytes?
Yeah, I also drink Element, just like 1 pack a day. I just gave my dad the last one today because he had a headache. We all went sledding, and my poor dad was out in the sun. And anyway, so I gave him my last one, so I might be out for like a week, but we'll see.
Well, let us know. Let us know how you do.
Yes. Erin, I wanted to talk a little bit about, so I was looking back at your story here, and so this is just very what's it called? Like you're verifying an experience I'm having, or you're like, anyway, it's the same thing. Your experience with this made me realize like, oh my gosh, I wasn't alone. The heart palpitations and the lightheadedness, feeling like you're going to pass out and being afraid to drive. Like, I just remember a time when I took my daughters to like Hobby Lobby, and I was like standing in Hobby Lobby, and I was feeling a little sick to my stomach, and all of a sudden I was like, I feel like I need to sit down, but I was like afraid to sit down. Yeah. And I told my 5-year-old daughter, like, okay, if I pass out, I need you to go find someone. Like, and that's kind of scary, to be in that position where you can't, you need your tiny child to provide for you because you're ill like that. And you don't know why. And it's just like, and so we went out to the car, and I leaned the seat back, and she's behind me in the seat. And I'm like, here's how you call dad. Like, cause it was like so scary. And so, like, and the Sibo, I had that as well. And like, so I'm sure a lot of that is linked, a lot of that stuff. Cause a lot of these things that I see, I'm like, holy cow, she has a very similar, I know someone said that, like, she's just speaking my experience, and so anyway, I really know where you're coming from too with that. And I don't know. I just feel you. It's scary.
Yeah, it was bad because I didn't know like from day to day, like how I would feel, and the anxiety of like, am I going to wake up and like have another miserable day? And, I wish I'd known about Element back then, right? Like, it wasn't a thing, and salt was bad. And it's just,
I had that same thing, and who knows what caused it. I passed out for the first time when I was 8 years old. Freaked the heck out of my parents. They did the test. Of course, nothing is wrong with her. Nothing is wrong with her. Well, then why am I passing out? I passed out several times throughout my life. And even if I wouldn't pass out, I know that dizzy, like you think you're gonna, it kind of starts getting black, even if you don't wake out. It used to happen every time with blood work for me. And who knows, I can't speak to if it's because of the electrolytes or the meat or whatever it is, but the 2 times I went and had blood drawn for my blood work, I did not pass out. And that's like a first. So that was pretty cool. I don't know
scary.
What the reason is, but scary.
Well, the funny thing that I learned later on that I should mention, because you say you don't know if it's from the meat, is it from this, is it from that? With the Sibo, and I didn't know this until later, that when those little buggers are in there feeding, they're feeding on your food essentially. So you're not absorbing everything that you're supposed to be absorbing. So it makes sense that, like, in retrospect, that I was deficient in the B12 and this stuff. And a lot of those things can cause the symptoms of the lightheadedness and all. So it all makes sense, like looking back on it. But at the time, like, it didn't make any sense at all. And I just looked like a crazy person.
So I totally
felt like that.
Sorry, I think you just answered this, but she did have this question. So you feel like it was maybe the Sibo, Erin, that was causing your dizziness?
Okay, so I don't know I don't know for sure. These are my thoughts looking back on it, that it could have been that my B12 was low from the Sibo that was causing that. It could have also played in that, like I said, I was trying to eat healthy, so I had cut out a lot of salt. Like, I was always a food tracker even back then, because I'm just a numbers person, and if I see it on paper, I can like figure out like, okay, what I need to do and everything. So I can remember looking back at some food logs and being like, oh my God, I only had like 500 milligrams of, or whatever it is, sodium that day. Like, it was
Mm.
so low because I wasn't salting my food and I was eating all of the fresh foods and vegetables, you know? And you don't think
Right.
about that. You think you're doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
If I
So,
could, I would love to add to this. So with my health journey, I first started with keto, and I was having a lot of dizzy spells, and I was having, there was one point where, and that was when I was having electrolytes, but I was making it myself. I was making like an electrolyte Gatorade, or, by
yeah.
myself at home. Anyway, that's not important. But I do remember there was this particular time when I was starting to have this like really bad numbness in the back of my head, and I was having, every time I would get up, it would be like yellow and black. So obviously, like, there was some kind of issue with, and then drinking electrolytes was what was helping. So I hope the person, Shanna, yeah, I would definitely try. No, you're good. I think I know I've been in and out so much of the episode. I'm so sorry about that with my technical earlier, but you got to see my husband, so there you go.
Yes, that was awesome.
So that was all I was gonna say, was that it could be an electrolyte issue. And I also didn't salt my food when I was doing keto, and I was eating a lot of greens. I was following the Dr. Berg method, and I was eating like 8 to 10 cups of spinach a day. I wasn't salting my food, like,
Yeah.
there's a lot of issues.
And then I would learn, and like my functional MD and the nutritionist would throw this stuff out there, that it could have also been that I was having like histamine issues on top of this, because I was eating so many like fruits and vegetables and like all this stuff that was supposed to be healthy. And, like having like a giant tub of spinach every day is not the best for someone that has allergies, with all that histamine and whatnot.
Yeah, and that's kind of when my rosacea first started. Like,
Ellie, I would get the flashes too. I don't know if I mentioned that, but I would get flushed all across here and all across my face, and it would just like hit me all of a sudden. I'd be working at my computer and,
Whoa.
I'm so sorry that you went through that.
Ugh.
I wanted to touch on something. I don't know if let me know if we already talked about this, but I think it's pretty important that I think a lot of people watching might relate to, that you felt like you were going crazy. Like, all of these tests were, did we talk about that?
No, and I think we need to talk about it.
So I was going to say,
I was going a little crazy just listening to the story, and it's condensed into 20 minutes. I can't imagine going through that for all of those years.
And the idea of, I just wanted to touch on this, like the idea of the invisible illness, like something that you can't see, and then everybody just kind of looks at you like, like you're crazy, or you're making things up, or you're being lazy, or and that can really take a toll on you mentally. And so this is kind of more like a comment, like you must feel so much better that you can look back and with the information you know now, and just like, oh,
it was
you
so
got through
crazy.
it.
Like, it was like some points where like even like even my husband, like you could tell, was like really like, and he wasn't wrong, because can you imagine all of this stuff that was going on and being like, yeah, okay, whatever, and then once I found out that I had the Sibo and everything started correcting itself, I was like, told you so, told you so, told you so. You want to go back to every doctor and be like, I had Sibo, I wasn't crazy. Like,
Oh my gosh, Garrett, that's the same experience with us. I hope he doesn't mind me sharing that, but like I think like those episodes I would have in the middle of the night where I would like pass out on the toilet, having diarrhea and throwing up, like because of the overgrowth of bacteria and everything. And like, I could tell that he'd be like, again tonight, like, and it's not his fault, because it's frustrating when it's still happening and no one's giving you answers, and he has to like release that frustration a little bit, but you do feel kind of helpless, like you're a bummer and you're putting people out. And I totally relate to that. Feel crazy.
And I would have that same stuff. Like a lot of times it would hit in the middle of the night. Like I would wake
You're
up and
kidding.
I would feel so off, and I'd be like, something's wrong, something's wrong, something's wrong. And that would turn into like a panic attack, you know? And then
Yeah.
it's like my legs would feel heavy, my arms would feel heavy. I would feel like the worst it would get, and I'm sure it was the panic and anxiety setting in more than the actual like illness or whatever, was I would just feel like my whole body was on fire. Like, I don't know if
Yeah.
that was the anxiety and the panic setting in, but then sometimes I was like ice cold. It was just really weird, and like nothing
Could
could
it
explain it. I did think I was going crazy for a while, for
could
sure.
it potentially be like nerve damage?
Absolutely. I would
Because
say, yeah, probably. Probably
because
because like I said, I did have the neuropathies in my hands and feet,
yeah,
and
because
luckily
this is
that
the
went away,
only.
but
I'm sorry, I keep interrupting. I think I'm
okay.
having like a little cutting in and out, but
Yeah.
like the only experience that I have, and this is like we don't have to go, we're not going to go into this today, but like my mom was actually struck by lightning,
Oh man.
and
Wow.
she has a lot of nerve damage in her body, and she's described the burning of her body, and so like that's what I think of like immediately, and so I was just curious if you thought it was nerve damage.
The only thing that makes me think that it's not actual nerve damage and it was more like the psychological and the panic was just how suddenly it would come on. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't like something that type of symptom I wasn't dealing with constantly. It was when like something would start to go wrong and I would freak out, you know? And I'm sure that my stress levels were crazy high and the cortisol and everything out. I was a mess.
I've
Absolute
never
mess.
heard anyone mention the heavy arms before. And that's just crazy because I had the heavy arms and it's like, but I thought, oh, that's just something that I go through. That's something that is like
No.
weird about me. But like, oh my gosh, you had the heavy arms. That's just like mind
Yeah,
blowing to me.
it felt like what's wrong with like I can't even
Ugh.
describe it. That's the only way that I could. Heavy arms, I guess, heavy legs, like
I'm having flashbacks. Trauma.
when
Crazy.
I was going through all of this and I was looking back at pictures and I'm kind of like reliving these years in my head, and it was really hard because especially having a young kid at the time, I feel like I could have been so much better. You know, and that there was so much that like I felt like I couldn't do, or I would go to the school events and I would just be sitting there miserable because I would feel so horrible. Like I didn't know if I was going to be on the floor in a minute, you know, and it's not cool. No one understands if you haven't been through it.
Ugh. I'm
So
so
you know what
sorry.
I mean?
Yeah. Well, we can't be there fully for our kids and in our community or anything. And I kind of talked about this before, I'm sure, but it always comes up in all of our lives that it's not our fault. You know, we don't know any better. We're trying to go off of what the experts know, the experts, tell us. And we can just do the best we can with what information we had. I was trying to do the best I could when I was vegan, and you were trying to do the best you could with whole foods and green smoothies. I did that too. And, but there was something missing. And so, yeah, it's so hard to look back and not feel that immense guilt, especially with the young years of our kids that you don't get that back. We can't take that time back, but that's why we're teaching them, right? You guys can do better for my grandbabies.
There you go.
Hopefully they're listening.
Yes, I hope so.
Yeah. Yeah.
I did want to mention, okay, how do you feel about ketosis? What are your thoughts on it? Is it beneficial? Do you stay in ketosis currently? What does it look like for you?
I can't say, I mean, I'm not an expert to be able to say whether it's beneficial or not. I mean, I guess that it is in a way. You hear enough about that. But for me, no, I'm not in ketosis anymore. When I would have those, the symptoms of like getting up, and I don't mean like once or twice. I mean like 5 times during the night to go to the bathroom because I had to pee constantly, all of that. That was probably the one thing that was like, I really don't need to do this anymore. I can add a little carbs. Let's see how I feel. And hopefully I won't be going through this anymore. And that's exactly what I did. So, but yeah, like I said before, I was in and out of ketosis up to like quite a high level of carbs. Like, I don't think people believe me when I say that, but I did the urine test and I did speak with my coach about it. And so, yeah, apparently if your net carbs are low enough, you can still be going in and out of that. So, but for me, it's not a goal. It's not necessary for me at this point. You know, if I ever had to do strict keto down the road for a health reason, I certainly would. But right now, this is working for me and I feel great. And, you know, that's what's most important.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Well,
I absolutely agree.
You feel great, Erin, and you also look great. And so I think there were maybe some pictures you wanted to share. Is that still right?
I can do that. Let me, let's see if I can actually do this correctly, though.
You've been using StreamYard a little bit more. I think you could do it.
A little bit more.
I believe in you.
Usually I'm not like hosting and doing this stuff, but let's see. So I'm going to do a share screen. And I guess you guys are going to have to enable it once I do it, right? Okay, so if someone can enable that and see this.
I got it.
Okay, so.
Oh, Erin, no.
That is.
I've been there. I know.
Wow.
That is me probably about 2013. So that's about 10 years ago. That was when I was close to 200 pounds. So you can see like big difference on a 5'2" frame than I am now. This is another one. I was at the park with my daughter, like just trying to have fun. But I look at this picture and I can see like the inflammation in my ankles and my legs. And I'm like, oh my God. Like you talk about body dysmorphia and stuff. I feel like I had it the opposite way. I did not realize that I was this big and unhealthy. I did not think that I was.
Wow.
And now I look at it now and I go, oh, I say to my husband, oh my God, like, and he's like, whoa, you know, I did not feel good. Like, forget about the fact that I don't like the way I looked. I felt like garbage. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know why I took this. I'm glad that I did. That was around the same time in a bathing suit. To give you an idea of how inflamed I was, that was my face.
Wow.
How round my face was.
Puffy.
And I look probably older than I do now, I think. Anyway, I might be way off base, but puffy. Yeah.
No, you're right.
Yeah, you look older for sure in that picture. And how many years ago was that?
This is probably about 2013, 2014 as well. So about 10 years ago or so.
Wow.
Same thing. And then this is probably, I might have lost a little bit of weight at this point. I guess I thought I looked good or something, taking that selfie.
You're so cute. I like the comment.
I was cute. It's cute.
Awesome.
And again, with my daughter, you can see it on my arms and everywhere. But the next one that I'm going to share, I wanted to share to give you an idea of like the Sibo and the bloating and how this was not normal. My stomach would be like completely like flat. This is after I lost quite a bit of weight. And this is, I remember this was at my mom's house. I had had some ice cream for dessert that I should not have had. And within a little while, I was 6 months pregnant. So, you know, crazy.
Yeah.
And now, okay, so now I'm going to show some of the other ones that.
Yay!
Not safe for work.
She has been working hard.
No.
She has amazing. Look at that.
This is when I first started the build program. So this was the very beginning of October. So I had already lost some weight after doing the gluten-free and low carb since May. But then I was amazed that like, I thought like, okay, like that's not bad. But then as I did this for a couple months, like the muscle really started coming out. This is getting into those pictures where I said I wasn't too sure on Instagram. Like a bunch of people unfollowed me and I thought maybe I had gone too far.
No, look at those shoulder muscles.
You need to be proud.
Woo! Oh my gosh.
Okay, and just for good measure, one with clothing. I like to wear cute clothes now.
There you go.
So I have the same shirt
so
on.
beautiful.
So anyway, that's that.
I'm so proud of you, Erin.
Wow.
Love.
I love
You
it.
guys, she was a little nervous to share these pictures, so show her some love in the chat because I think that is she's turned red. That is a fantastic testimonial to the good choices. You like figured it out. You're making good choices, and then the hard work you've put in since October. Amazing.
Thank you.
So much, so many people supporting.
It's good. It's nice. It's a nice feeling to feel healthy and not feel like you're gonna pass out.
Right?
Wow.
Thank you, Gail.
And I think what's so great is that even though we eat different diets, there are still common threads that bring us all together. And
Thank you.
maybe there's somebody who has very similar symptoms to you, but don't want to go all the way to carnivore, but have that sweet spot in the middle. And we all, and like Cristie was saying earlier, we love all of you guys.
I
You fall on the
feel
spectrum.
like, and I've done a couple videos on this. I'm always questioning, okay, was it the low carb that fixed me? Was it the fact that I have celiac and I went gluten-free? Like, what was it? Because I've done this a couple different ways in the past and I've had like positive results. So I kind of think that like with all of us, it's not so much what we're eating, but what we're not eating anymore. That's probably really, really helping, because we're eating like good food, like regardless of what we eat, we're not eating the garbage that we probably all ate at one point during our lives. And I think that's like really important, regardless of whether you're doing no carbs or some carbs or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, and then I think
I
everybody
agree
has
with
to sort of fine tune it for them. And I don't think it may not even look the same for me 6 months from now as it does now. Like, I think we have to reevaluate that. I know being 48 years old, I'm probably in for some hormonal shifts, you know, coming up.
Yeah, and me too.
Yeah, we're in the same boat here. And so currently my diet is working best for me, keeping my mental health, you know, in a stable and good place. And all of that, keeping my weight in check, keeping my muscle, like I'm continuing to put on muscle, which is amazing. My body's talking to me, which is it never did before. Like I could tell if something is going well or not.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks,
Yes.
Mike.
Yeah.
So you know, yeah, I am not. I applaud you. Yay! Yeah, I think so, Mike. Erin, for doing that fine tuning, you know, that you feel like you needed to do. And I mean, the pictures don't lie, girl. So it's working for you.
Yes.
And you know what? I think that when I first started it, I was like, I'm never going to eat this again. I'm never going to eat that again. And then as time went by, I was like, I think I better try this or that. And I like to experiment on myself. So I just kept trying things. And like, for instance, the other day, and I probably shouldn't have done this, I reintroduced just a little bit of rice with my dinner on Christmas Eve. And you know, the next morning I woke up and my fingers were like swollen and it was hard to get my rings off. And I was like, you know, maybe that's just not for me. But now I know I might try it once or twice more and see if I have the same thing, and we'll see. But you know, I'm probably just a person that can't tolerate grains, you know, and it is what it is, you know, I'll figure it out. So
yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Well, are we ready for the meaty question?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
I have to answer this.
You have to answer it, Erin, because
I'm a little nervous.
you are doing great. So here is our meaty question wheel. Okay, and I'm going to spin this, and we're going to see what we can come up with for you to answer, my friend.
Uh-oh.
Okay, so look at this. I even tailored it to say low carb. So can you describe a typical day's worth of meals on your low carb diet? See, that wasn't so bad, Erin.
So right now I'm doing 3 meals a day, and sometimes I'll do 3 meals and a snack or like a protein, like hot chocolate at night or whatever. But generally my first meal will be, usually I'll do like 4 eggs. Sometimes I'll do the eggs with like a little bit of cottage cheese on the side and some berries. I might do some apple with it. For lunch, usually it's either like, I switch it back and forth. I might have some burger patties. I really started to fall in love with salmon again. I'll do some salmon. Sometimes if I'm in a rush, I'll just do some like plain deli turkey. Like I still do eat the turkeys and the chicken just for like the protein and whatnot. And then dinner will be kind of like the same thing, depending on what I had for lunch. Maybe the salmon, maybe some burgers. My husband will throw a steak on the grill. You know, I'll incorporate little bits of sweet potato now, sometimes white potato, but I'm still not too sure how I'm doing with that. I'm still trying that out. But yeah, that's basically it. Like, you know, the meats, the dairy, hard cheeses, some fruits, some vegetables, not going crazy with it. Yep. My element.
Your
So we
element,
have a
yes.
question here for you. Does fruit bother you with SIBO?
No, because I basically that SIBO's at the very least in remission at this point. So no, I don't have the problem with the overgrowth of the bacteria. So I do eat the fruit without a problem. Now I don't down like 10 pieces a day, but I might have like an apple and then some berries or whatever. Some days I'll have 2 apples. And no, but apple did bother me at one point. I would get the bloating and not feel well, but now I eat it and completely flat, no issues. No any issues.
Yeah, I wonder if that has to do with healing your gut first, and then maybe you can, for this person, I don't know if they struggle with that, but maybe you need to heal it.
What I've heard, that once you heal it, like that, you can start to reintroduce some stuff. Yeah.
Very interesting.
So I don't know if these things are related, but I heard you say earlier in your story, chronic UTIs. When you had those chronic UTIs, did you just take a ton of antibiotics?
Yes, I did a ton of antibiotics, and it spread to my kidneys at one point. And at one point I even had kidney stones. I don't even know if that was connected. But I was just miserable. I would go to the doctor and they'd say, nothing's wrong with you. And I'm like, no, I feel like even when I didn't have one, I would feel like I had one. So I was back and forth to the specialists and everything, getting all of the tests run, and I think they're called IBPs. It's the x-rays where they inject you with the dye to look at your kidneys. I had them done several times. So yeah, and I was only like 21, 22 years old at this time when that was going on.
So I went through something very similar with the chronic UTIs. And then were you diagnosed with cystitis? Because I was. After. Yep. Okay.
I think they actually, what was it? Interstitial, it was IC.
Interstitial cystitis. Yes. And they said,
yes.
Sometimes I was definitely having the UTI, but then sometimes it would just feel like I had a UTI.
Yes, exactly.
That's when I went to the urologist more and got an interstitial cystitis diagnosis.
Same thing.
But yeah, I don't have any more symptoms of that, but it was terrible. I mean, it was miserable.
Oddly enough, that was one of the things that my gastroenterologist said to me. A lot of times when people have been on a lot of antibiotics during their life, they tend to develop the Sibo and those conditions more readily. So I had like a lot of strikes against me, like celiac can contribute to it. So that was probably going on. The antibiotics, the Prilosec, and all of the stuff for reflux that they had given me over the years. It was a hot mess.
Yeah, it made me wonder when you said the UTI thing. I was like, I bet she was on a bunch of antibiotics, and then
the
Sibo.
I was on.
I'm not a doctor. I don't know. But
That's so funny because I had chronic ear infections as a little girl, so I was constantly on antibiotics, and I also had issues with UTIs, and so I think that's. Wow. Okay, you guys just blew my mind. I'll have to look into
Well, I mean, I feel I'm the same way. I mean, after each pregnancy, the first kid, I didn't test positive for that bacteria. I can't remember what it's called.
Yeah.
Where they pump you full of, I can't remember what it is. Put it in the comments if you guys know, but you're tested for it every pregnancy. And if you test positive, then they pump you full of antibiotics during labor. And then, that gets into your baby too. And so I just, there's so many things I wish I knew, guys. But the symptoms and the issues and the health issues were so much worse after having those last 2 kids where I did test positive. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I just at the time thought, it's because I'm recovering from having a baby. But the reality is those 2 were, full of antibiotics the entire time I was in labor. And so it's frustrating.
I know. The more we learn, the more we're like, why past me? Why?
Yeah.
Why? I know.
We didn't know.
It's so true.
So, Erin, I would love to share your channel with everybody.
Thank you.
With mine. So, like I always say, let's go to a faraway place. Not so far. So, this is Erin's channel. Erin, right there. Those people look familiar.
Ooh, I love it.
So yeah, I used to be the low carb. Yeah, there we are. It's like we know each other or something. So recently you did Vlogmas, which I mean,
she was Vlogmas, guys. Oh my goodness!
I did it every day. I'm so tired of Vlogmas. I don't think I'll ever do that again. I was
Uh,
challenged to do that. I accepted the challenge and I did one every day.
You are so strong and so dedicated, and
I think it killed my channel
Amazing.
too.
Yes.
So if you want
Oh,
some,
no, it's
even though
great.
Christmas is over, if you want some Christmas cheer, you can definitely watch her Vlogmas. But she also has her coffee talks. She goes live all the time with Cristie. You might know her. She's on the
Coffee
screen
talk.
now. Coffee talk.
You're
And
in
we ramble about nothing.
Coffee talk. And Mike joins us too for coffee talk. If we don't do it on a Sunday, he'll join us too. So
That's
those are fun.
right. And she talks about all things nutrition and her health journey, and also productivity hacks if you need those as well. So it's definitely a lifestyle channel, and she's spilling the beans about all things health and home. So there you go. So please go subscribe to Erin at Brewing Better Living.
Thank you. And I'm going to be touching more. I just said this the other day that I'm going to be doing more like celiac related content because I feel like there's now I keep finding people like me, right? I think there's people that might need that information and can relate to someone that's been through the craziness and the, however long it took to get to that point. So probably going to focus on a little bit more of that.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's definitely needed in this space. We need the specifics. Okay. Are we ready to roar, you guys?
We're so ready to roar.
Are you ready? Get those roars
Bring it
ready.
Getting it ready, getting it ready.
Okay. Are we ready, Erin? Okay. 3, 2, 1. Roar!
Whoa, Ellie got right up in there. I think Ellie wins the roar competition tonight for sure.
She did. That was a count.
Put
I
your
saw her
roars in the
pouncing.
chat. Yes. Okay, thank you, Renee, for the meow. And Renee, you got me. Annabelle is roaring. You guys, I think we all need to spam Google or whoever's in charge of these emojis that we need a lioness emoji and not just the lion. Okay. Yeah, thanks, Mike, for roaring with us.
Uh-oh. That's not one.
Oink. Oh, no.
We're going to eat you, Eric.
That's our food, Eric. That's our food.
That's good. Oh, Ellie, of course. I always put you up there. I love it. We got a purr. Love it. Oh my gosh. Let's see. Oh, we got one from Susan. Thank you. Good job. Awesome,
all right.
you guys.
Well, this has been great. Thank you, Erin, so much for coming on. And
thank you for having me on. This was great.
We loved hearing your whole story. I think a lot of people in the chat, by the way, were like, I mean, we all kind of know you, or a lot of us do, but it's like, wow, I've never heard Erin's whole story laid out like that. So I think that was beneficial for quite a few of us. So thank you so much for sharing that. And with that, we're going to sign off until next Tuesday, you guys.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.